I'll just make opening comments and then.
Okay.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hello everyone. Welcome to this second session of this week's Weekend with Wisdom with Swamini Swatma Vidyananda ji. And she is expounding on the philosophy of Kaivalya Upanishad. Uh, Viewers, please post your questions on Q&A box and not on the chat box. And Swamini ji will take up these questions at the end. So, without much further ado, I request Swamini ji to start the session.
Thank you. ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयामदेवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेमदेवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्तिः 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 ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः 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 Kaivalya means the only thing that exists. And yes, in the morning we saw, and yesterday for some people, depending on where you are logging from, we saw that the only thing that is worth talking about, worth knowing, is what? You. The source of everything that is existence, because you are a self-conscious being, a conscious being, and this conscious being is, conscious of oneself and conscious of everything else. That is why you are unlike anything else in the universe. And if you say, oh, what about this, what about other people? The other people are also there. So many other people, they are all the same as me. They may be the same as you, but the thing is, there is only one consciousness. Many bodies, many different, ways of, eating, drinking, wearing clothes, so many things. What we see, the differences outside, all these differences underlie a sacred truth, which is the only thing in the world that is worth knowing, and knowing which one is free finally of sorrow. Otherwise, one is just a crying jiva. This is what this is the gist of whatever we have talked about. Little more we have to see before we actually enter into the dialogue, and we'll be seeing that in this session. So, what does this Kaivalya do? The Kaivalya puts one in touch with that truth of oneself, which is the only thing that there is, which is the only thing that there is to know. And what is that only thing? That you are one. Kaivalya therefore means only one. Yeah, only one. and that only is a qualification for that one which is indivisible. As we can just take a trip to the Chandogya Upanishad, which reiterates the same thing in a slightly different way. एकमेव अद्वितीयं सत् एव idamagre आसीत्. Before this whole variegated universe of names and forms and all kinds of complexes, I am not good enough, I am an idiot, and why was I born, and why doesn't anybody love me, all these complexes in the midst of all this. Before all these things came into being, before means it's not the question of time. It's just a question of, that which existed before this universe came into being. The universe is less of a creation, more of a projection. It is not a srishti. According to the Veda, it is abhivyakti. It is projected and then taken back, resolved, projected and resolved. From that one source, from that Kevala Ishvaraha, from that Ishvara alone, the whole thing is projected. So it's not separate from Ishvara. What is projected is one with the projector. And so before this projection came, what was there? Kevala. Here it is called Kevala in the Kaivalya Upanishad. And when we motor down to, what is that? Chandogya Upanishad, 6th chapter, we have the word Sat. So what's the difference between Sat and Kevala? No difference. Then why are they confusing us? Why can't the Upanishad use just one word so that we will understand this? Well, because people get what is that, the ahankara that is listening to this knowledge, it plays tricks. It gets bored, it gets restless, it goes off on a little, manorajya. Manorajya means a little trip down memory lane. Oh, what will happen when I get enlightened? One starts fantasizing all kinds of things. When? While doing Shravanam. And so therefore, the Upanishad keeps you on your toes. In one place it is called Kaivalya, Kevala. In another place it is called Sat. In the third place it is called Madhu Vidya, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And then in another place it is called Jyotir Brahmana, again in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And again further along in the 7th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad, the same Kevala, Kaivalya is called as something else. What is it called there? Bhuma, Bhuman, Bhuma. So, very interesting. So, the same thing, same Atma, same Brahman. Otherwise, A for Atma, B for Brahman, just only two things you talk about, C for Chit, D for Dharma. We can go on. Only few things these Vedantins talk about. And then the mind, the mind actually wants to know, but the ahankara comes in the way. Been there, done that, Atma, how much Atma? And Brahman. And so therefore, when you hear the word Kevala, Kaivalya, it's new. And so the person who is a good sleeper, where in Vedanta class, waits till Sahana Bhavatu opening mantra and then nods off. Sahana Bhavatu is a lullaby, and Purnamadaha, the closing mantra, is a Suprabhatam, for whom that person, is nodding off, and then suddenly hears the word Kevala. Oh, I thought we were talking about Atma, but now it is Kevala. It is presented in 100 different ways because it is infinite. You are infinite. So we can never get tired of talking about this. And then, for the people who have that same level of preparation that Ashvalayana had when he approached his teacher, you don't ever get tired of listening to it. In other words, you can never be Vedanta'd out. Some people say, I'm spaced out, I'm done with this, I'm done with that. This happened to me one time. I went to some town where I go every time, and I went the next year, and there was one lady in the previous times who was very active and who was who had arranged everything. She was close to the organizer, she was just very up front and center of the whole organizing my talks. And then I didn't see her, so I was naturally concerned. So then I said to the host, where is this so and so, where is this person, because I hope she's okay. And the host said, she's okay, but she is swamied out. Because you see, before you came there was Swami so and so, before that there was Swami so and so, and then so she worked for all these Swamis, and now she is swamied out. You can be swamied out, but you will never be Vedanta'd out. If that, if there is a tivra ichha, a cultivated desire, if the uncultivated desire to be one with this Kevala, to be one with this oneness, and to get rid of this sense of alienation between, myself and the world and God, what we call God, Ishvara. If that, this uncultivated desire is given a free rein and expression, if it is brought to the forefront, then there is nothing boring about this, because it's all about you. It's like looking into the mirror. And this is what is going to be the topic for today. It is Vedanta is not like any other pursuit. This is the first thing we have to understand, because every other pursuit and Vedanta, there are some very basic but profound differences. In every other pursuit, in every other fulfillment of any desire, the desirer is left intact. In the fulfillment of the desire to know something, like botany, biochemistry, physics, whatever it is, the knower, the pramata, is left intact. You are the subject, and what you are studying is the object, and same thing, you are the desirer, and then then the object of desire, you want to become one with, you want to go and get it, you want to become a karta, then you become a bhokta. We saw that, karta bhokta, but then this is in other pursuits. But the pursuit of Vedanta manages to knock off the desirer, manages to knock off the knower. How? This is a very important discussion, because you see, the desirer is not the true self. It is not you. It is you plus a superimposed status that has just come on to you by association. First it is by association. I have desires is not a problem. We discussed that at length in the last session. But that I am a desirer is a problem. Why is I am a desirer a problem? Because there is an identification with myself and the desirer, and as the desirer, between myself and the desire, there is no space. I become one with the desire, and I am minting my new identity as the desirer. This is a problem, because there the desirer is always a sad and discontented person. But how can you say that? Because it is very difficult to fulfill a desire. Ask anybody who has tried to fulfill a desire, you will see how difficult it is. Because there is many a slip, they say, between the cup and the lip. Same thing here. Many things that keep you apart. And all those factors we talked about earlier in the session, they are all karmic. Karma keeps you away from wanting, getting what you want and what you feel you deserve, what you need, all these things. And so therefore what? So therefore, this concept that I have become one with the desirer is, this desiring person is the same as me, is a mistake. It's a mistake which is the baby of Atma Ajnanam. Atma Ajnanam, another name, Atma Ajnanam means self-ignorance. Another name for this self-ignorance is what, Atma Ajnanam. One more name is there. It is called Agrahanam. Agrahanam, technical term. Agrahanam means not grasping the truth of myself. Not grasping. I don't know, you know. I don't know. Agrahanam. Grahanam, grasping. Agrahanam, not grasping that I am Kevala, that I am Sat, that I am Bhuma, that I am Madhu Vidya, that I am Jyotir, Jyotihi, Jyotisham, Jyotihi. Not grasping that, this is what, that I am Brahman. Not grasping that is a problem, you know. But not knowing that I am Brahman does not create sorrow. Very interesting. So ajnanam doesn't create sorrow. Ajnanam centered on the self does neither create sorrow nor creates any problems. Why? Like I said in the earlier session, we have dogs, cats, all these things. They don't know I am God, they don't know I am Bhagavan, they don't know anything. And so, but still, they seem to be happy if they are left alone, you know. And even though people earnestly come and tell me, my dog is also listening to your online classes, Swamiji, they, the dog listens because you are sitting there, okay? If you get up and go, the dog will also get up and go. The dog is not there for Vedanta. Vedanta is not meant for the dog. Vedanta is meant for the one dogged by all kinds of complexes centered on the self. So, what's the difference between the pet dog and you? The pet dog is happy, you are not. Both of you have Atma Ajnanam, but the pet dog is better off in a way, you know. But unfortunately, the pet dog doesn't have a chance in this life at time, at least as a dog, to shift its focus, to shift its, its condition, and to become a knower of this, to have this understanding. But you have a chance because you are born in this body, and you are, you are free to have this, you are free enough to have a complex centered on the self. So Atma Ajnanam is common to both, Agrahanam is common to both. But for the human being, there is another twist to this Ajnanam. It's almost like the Ajnanam had a baby, and the brood of this Ajnanam is called Anyatha Grahanam. Anyatha Grahanam means not only do I not know myself, which I said is not a big problem, but because if I don't know myself, I take, it's I just go about my life. I'm in the laws of the Lord, I'm in the laws of the five elements, I just am whoever I am. But the problem comes if I take myself to be what I'm not. Dehoham, I am the body. Manasoham, I am the mind, I'm as good as the body. You see, this is where the sorrow is. I'm as good as the body, I'm as good as the mind. And this is what is the in the traditional Shastra, an example is given of the rope and the snake. And so, nobody gets scared of a rope. So if, let's say, a rope is lying down there in the grass, and you don't know it's a rope, and you're just walking, going about your merry way, then it doesn't become a topic of what? Fear. Doesn't become a subject matter of fear. When does it become a subject matter of fear? When you mistake it for a snake. This is what this is the this is the thing here. And maybe the sages knew this a long time ago. That's why the mistake that is made, upon one thing by superimposing another thing, as the rope and the snake, has got a name in Sanskrit, aropa. You see, it's just like the word rope. Very nice. Aropaha. So this aropa creates problems. I am the body. So body dharma is put on the Atma. Mind dharma is put on the Atma. So there are two mistakes here centered on the self. I take myself to be what I am not. Mistake number one. Like, I'm not the body, but I say I am the body. I'm not just the mind. I say I am the mind, And then I'm not the senses, but I conclude that I am as good as my feelings, I'm as good as what I can see, etc., etc. And then, and then what? I'm as good as the body, I'm as good as the mind. This is, I take myself to be what I am not. One kind of aropa. And what is the other kind of aropa? Which is logical. It is not easy. It's not very hard to figure out the other kind of aropa. The second kind of aropa is what? You know, I take myself, to first is I take myself to be what I'm not. And then second one is I don't accept who I really am. What I am, I reject. What I'm not, I take on. Two mistakes centered on the self. These are the twin babies of Atma Ajnanam. And the broods of Atma Ajnanam causes sorrow. This is what it is. Causes pain. And Vedanta is the, and is the remedy that removes the pain. Removes the pain. How? By removing the notion that you are as good as the desiring person. And that's how we have sentences in the Upanishads like the Taittiriya Upanishad. Sarvan kaman samashnute. Brahmana saha. So all the desires are, completely eliminated with one swoop by the study of which knowledge, which Kevala, which Kaivalya, which Brahman. That is what is needing to be pursued. Such big statements, beautiful statements are made. And how are these statements made? I mean, this because this is a master key. Every desire is for the infinite alone, you as the infinite. I don't want to die. I told you this is a universal desire. I don't want to die. And then I don't want to die. I want to be forever. And that forever alone is what makes you happy. Because if you ask somebody how long you want to be happy, they will not say, please make me happy, oh Lord, for 5 minutes. Nobody will say that. How long you want to be happy? Forever. And the problem is that this forever is transference. There is transference with this forever. The concept of forever, which I have a vague idea about as the jiva, I put it on to all kinds of finite things and try to make the finite into the infinite repeatedly, life after life after life. And not only one person, not only one jiva, everybody else is doing it. And so you feel like there is justification, like everybody is doing it, so it is okay. And then what? Misery loves company. So we will all be miserable together. This is what is called samsara. This is what the whole problem is. And that which eliminates it is what is called Upanishad Visharati. Removes it. And Visharati, what Visharati? Anartha Vratan Visharati. It removes all kinds of unwanted. Anartha is Ashubha. Unwanted. Ashubhani Nirachaste. And so this anartha vratan, prahinoti means removes. Vrata means a group, a host of all kinds of unwanted things. Fear, sorrow, suspicion, rejection, complexes centered on the self. Because this was the question asked earlier, Vedanta in daily life. Yes, this is all in daily life alone. And so all this, it just removes without a trace. And that is what is called the Upanishad. That the word Shad itself has these meanings. Visharati, removes. Avasadayati, destroys, uproots. And then what? Brahma Gamayati, it unites you with that oneness that one is seeking, searching, searching, searching. So to go back to the topic for today, what we were discussing so far, what we have been discussing so far is that, there is a difference between Vedanta and every other pursuit. When you pursue something like a job, a relationship, some kind of a pastime, a hobby, whatever it is that you pursue, earnestly with all your, heart, you as an entity is still separate from the object of the pursuit. That's why there is a sense of incompleteness no matter how close you may be to whatever you pursue. There is a sense of want and incompleteness because there is a separation, that subject object separation. In other words, there is no kevala, there is no kaivalya in those pursuits. But when you pursue the truth of yourself, you know, when whatever you want, instead of looking and moving with the finger here and pointing to things, you come back to yourself and you pursue this. There is, there is a difference, because it knocks off the knower, it knocks off the desiring person, it knocks off the wanting person, it knocks off the struggling person trying to swim in the murky waters of samsara. Mirabai sings about it very beautifully, our medieval saint. And she says, Mori lagi lagana guru charanana ki. I am just completely obsessed with the feet of the Guru. Feet of the Guru means knowledge. Feet of knowledge. The foundation of the knowledge. Why? Jhoota maya sab sapanana ki. Everything else that I encounter is what? Just, just aropa. It's just a transference. It's just a putting, what is that? It's just a superimposition. Jhoota maya sab sapanana ki. Morilagi lagan Guru Charananaki. And then what? I went to the Guru, she says, to get some swimming lessons. Yeah, how to swim in samsara. Because there is the eels of doubt, there is the seaweed of despair, and then there is, what else? Riptides. Riptides of various kinds of things coming and attacking me. Undercurrents are there, riptide is there. And then desires are there, seaweed, and despair is there, all kinds of dangers are there, fearful waves are there. And I thought, let me go to the Guru and see if I should do front stroke, back stroke, butterfly stroke, which is the best way to swim in samsara. Because who am I? I'm a flotsam or a jetsam. I'm being thrown about by the winds of misfortune and the waves of despair. Let me go to the Guru and ask for some help. And then what did the Guru do? She says a miracle happened, She said, I just closed my eyes, fell at the feet of the Guru, and when I opened the eyes, Bhavasagar sab sukh gaya hai, fikr nahi mohe taranana ki. I found that the ocean of samsara, the Guru's, the warmth of the glance of the grace of the Guru took away all the ocean of samsara, dried it up. So what was left? There was no need to swim at all. Took away the need to just keep bobbing up and down in the mediocrity of the status quo. That is what is the miracle of this knowledge. And how did this need to swim, how was this taken away? Because the Guru, ulata bhai meri nayanana ki, the Guru revolutionized my vision so that what I saw was different from what I saw later. What I saw earlier was I was mired in the eclipse of the subjectivity of the fears and the tears, and what I saw was just gloom, doom, despair, and this ocean which full of crocodiles and eels and sharks and stingrays, all these kinds of things. Inside the water, the stingray will give you a shock. Yeah, they're all there. This is the ocean, fauna. And I was afraid of all of them. And then I thought how to swim and not come under their spell. Then I thought, when the Guru's teaching happened, the Guru's grace and the teaching of the Guru made me see what? Made me see the truth that there was no ocean. The Guru reduced the ocean to but a notion centered on the self. I am afflicted. That I am afflicted is a notion. It's not the ocean of samsara. And that knowledge by which the ocean itself is reduced to the notion, how can we even put any other pursuit alongside this? And that's why you can never give me the excuse anymore. I don't have time for Vedanta. You see? This is why. Because it's not like anything else. Because gaining this, you gain everything else, including a complete freedom of vision, an objective vision where nothing and nobody in this universe is out to get you. That's not an easy thing. This is huge. This is a very, very, very big thing. And so therefore this is a very different kind of knowledge, extremely different kind of knowledge. And not the not your usual branches of knowledge or any other pursuit. Because in any other pursuit, you don't, it's like, for example, a professor of microbiology, the professor of microbiology, after teaching microbiology for 40 years, does not turn into a microbe. Yeah. Suddenly he or she comes to the class, and then you cannot see them because they have become microscopic after they have become one with the branch of the knowledge they were studying. No. Even after retirement, they'll be different from that knowledge. But this knowledge, Brahmavit Brahmaiva Bhavati, the knower of Brahman, Mundaka Upanishad says, is just Brahman alone. There is nothing other than that. Nothing other than that. You become one with this knowledge because you, as who you thought you were, is completely shifts that vision. Because the problem is not in who you are. Who you are is fine. Because if the problem is, if the thought that I am subject to sorrow, if you are really subject to sorrow, then I tell you, every morning you'll be waking up with a wet pillow because you'll be crying all night. But that never happens. In sleep, everybody is happy. In sleep, everybody is fine. In sleep, there is no desire. In sleep, there is no pain. In sleep, there is no sorrow. And then only when you wake up, it starts. And so what that means? What does that mean? There is some vyabhichara. Vyabhichara means there is a contradiction. This is our entry point. Just through this example of sleep, this is our entry point. We can just immediately see that, oh, in sleep I am one with the infinite, except I don't know it, I only know it in hindsight. Ah, that was a good sleep. But as soon as I wake up, there is a problem. The problems, as soon as I wake up and stretch, the problems also stretch with me. They also wake up. I am having my coffee and they start complaining, and I also start complaining. The shadow wakes up with the, shining self. And very soon the shadow takes over, and, because of the Atma Ajnanam and the Agrahanam leading to the Anyatha Grahanam, the shadow takes over and the shadow calls the shots. This is why we need Vedanta. This is why we need to study the Upanishad. And so now, with these words, we can go into the text a little bit and see what it has to say. As I said, it starts with a very nice, what is called Akhyayika. Akhyayika means there is a little storylet. Akhyayika, a baby story. And so the baby story is that this person called Ashvalayana, and I told you in the morning itself that the Upanishad is in the form of a dialogue. Because in our tradition, the teaching of oneself as Ishvara is not a matter for belief. It is not a matter for belief. There is nothing to believe. It is an equation that needs to be understood after repeated enquiry, listening, mananam, meditation, contemplation, etc., if needed. But after repeated listening, it is something that needs to be understood and incorporated, assimilated. In other traditions, it's a matter of belief. Ishvara is a matter of belief. And they will say, there is Ishvara. Oh, okay. And then what? You have to say that, you are saved. But how do I know I'm saved? No, just you have to believe. You have to believe you are saved, and then you will be saved. For us, it is not like that. We don't have this concept of savior. In fact, during this, my guru, Pujya Swamiji, Dayananda ji, went and had a this thing, had been invited to the Millennium United Nations Summit, and there, he was being interviewed, and suddenly some reporter stuck a microphone, you know, in front of him. Swamiji, what is your message for the new millennium? This was 20 years ago. And what a beautiful, time to be there. And he said, what a beautiful thing to witness. He said, I don't have a message, I have a prayer. Yes, what is your prayer, Swamiji? My prayer is, oh Lord, please save me from all saviors. That was his prayer. Beautiful prayer, because that is in keeping with our tradition. There is no, then you don't need to be saved. You are already saved. Mirabai was not saved by the Guru. Her vision was, distorted, and the vision was completely changed as a result of this knowledge. You are already saved. Moksha is an as though pursuit. You are already mukta. You are free. You are kevala. You are bhuma. You are Brahman. You are Bhagavan. How many, in so many ways I can put it. You are already completely free. And then what? So therefore, there is no need to be saved. So the pursuit is therefore cognitive. It is something to be understood. It is something to be understood without a shadow of doubt, without a shadow of vagueness or error. So the knowledge is made free, doubt free, error free, mistake free, vagueness free. And then you can enjoy this knowledge. Until then, one does what is called Shravanam. And this is what is so important. This is why it is unlike any other branch of knowledge, because here, it is, what is that? Prasaktasya, pratishedha. Basically, it is the gain of what is, it's an as though gain of what is already gained. It's an as though gain. It's not a real gain, because you are not away from what you seek. The seeker is the sought. And so therefore the Upanishad has to be in the form of the dialogue, because it is not something that you swallow hook, line and sinker. And think of who is coming and sitting in front of the teacher for the Upanishad. Who is this prospective student? The prospective student has been, saved by the, quote unquote, saved by the Guru from the hot, frying in the hot oil of samsara and put on a plate. Okay? Yeah, like gulab jamun. And what does the Guru do? Puts this jiva who has just come out of the hot oil of samsara into a lovely sugar syrup, fragrant with what is that? Saffron and cardamom powder and saffron, flavored sugar syrup. This jiva is put into to soak up the knowledge of the Upanishads, and to get rid of the feeling, I am all alone, I am in the middle of samsara, I am a samsari, I am an idiot, I am very, very sorry, but I am a samsari. All these things have to go. These notions have to go. These notions have to be shunned, and then that is the beauty of this knowledge. And so therefore the Upanishad has to be in the form of a dialogue. It is, if because think of who is coming for the study: the person with a lot of complexes, and the ahankara with a lot of resistance, because the ahankara is not going to go down quietly. The dog you can teach to sit. You can have a little biscuit in the hand and say, sit. It will sit after looking at the biscuit, okay? Not because it is moved by your command. It will sit only for the biscuit. It's also clever. But the ahankara, even if you give it a reward, it will not sit, because it is suspicious. This is a jiva who is suspicious, because the jiva has been disappointed life after life after life, and has a sense of, overarching suspicions about everybody and everything, including the Guru. Who are you? How do I know you'll give me what I want? How do I know, why do I need you? And if it is a self knowledge, I should get it by myself. Why do I need you? All this we'll be talking about. But just this is just a little, sketch of what is to come. So the guru also here, one is suspicious of. One is suspicious of the book. One is suspicious of the message of the book. Am I going to be converted into something? Am I going to be taken over? And more often than not, the ahankara likes its little complexes even though it's miserable. It clings on to the notion I am the pramata because some little happiness it gets, I suppose. The ahankara means ego. You know, it clings on to the notion I am incomplete, I am an idiot. Why? Because it can use this to manipulate other people. It can use this information or this misinformation rather to help, what is that, get whatever it wants. It can turn on the waterworks and cry and feel itself a victim. It can then become aggressive and feel itself, as someone who is, unleashing all kinds of terrors. So this ahankara, it has to be dragged kicking and screaming to the Upanishad. Really, it's not going to sit and take this very nicely. And so if the Upanishad was a monologue, not a dialogue, you are a you are Brahman. And if 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita did not have a single question by Arjuna, nobody would be interested. Nobody would come. In fact, sometimes we love Arjuna more than Lord Krishna because we identify with him. He's just like us. I mean, he also wonders, sthita prajnasya ka bhasha. How does the person of knowledge sit? How does the person of knowledge eat and drink? And how can I recognize this person? He has similar questions to us. They are similar to us. If knowledge is the goal, then why do I have to do karma? He asks these kinds of questions. We love him. We love these questions because these questions actually, become the impetus for the next chapter, and we don't want the teaching to end really. Otherwise, the Bhagavad Gita would have finished in 2 chapters. I tell you, Brahma Vidya was given, this knowledge of the self was given, Yoga Shastra, Karma Yoga, how to lead a life conducive to gaining this knowledge was also given. What more is left? But he had a question in the beginning of chapter 3 which gave birth to chapter 3. So therefore, we love this back and forth because you are an agent here. As I told you, you are a conscious agent here in the sense of seeking the knowledge. All this time you have been an agent, karta, karta, karta. And the ahankara, if it's told to drop the kartritvam, the do worship, immediately it's going to rebel. So the guru has to find some other ways. The guru has to first, say, okay, come, let's have a chat about the Atma. Talk to me. What do you want to know? Then the student asks the question. But even though it's a dialogue, it's a special dialogue called Samvada. It's a special dialogue. It's not an ordinary dialogue between friends, like, shall we go to this movie? No, forget movie, let's go to dinner. This is called Vada. Samvada means I look up to the person as a teacher. I look up to what they have to say. So I'm not going to contest what they say. I take it with a, what is that called? I take it with a grain of salt. I may have my suspicions, but I give them the benefit of doubt. I give them the benefit of doubt. And I tell them, what, you might, you might have been completely you might be completely right, and let me look at it. Let me give this a benefit of doubt and see how to go about this. This is what the whole thing is. And so therefore this what's his name, this Ashvalayana, is the student here, and Brahmaji, Lord Brahma, is the teacher. So this is what is called samvada, respectful listening with a view to gaining the knowledge rather than contesting the teacher's knowledge or competing with the teacher or basically disrespecting the teacher or contradicting the teacher. That is not the idea. The idea is to gain the knowledge. So I come from a place of I don't know and I want to know. So this is the kind of a special dialogue that is there in the uh, in the in the Upanishad. Every Upanishad has this kind of a dialogue. Sometimes we know the names of the teachers, like in this Upanishad, we know both the teacher's name, Lord Brahma, and then we know the student's name. Who is the student? Ashvalayana. And I told you in the earlier class that you just don't have a teacher dragged off the street, some person who you don't know, because the knowledge, then there won't be any shraddha. More on that later on. There won't be any shraddha, there won't be any kind of a respect or a devotional, trust regarding this knowledge. And so therefore what? So therefore it has to be an exalted teacher. You find in all the Upanishads. Who is the teacher? Sanat Kumara, one of the sages sitting at the feet of Lord Dakshinamurti in the 7th chapter of Chandogya, is the teacher. Uddalaka, another very learned person, is the teacher in the 6th chapter. So the names Pippalada is the teacher in the Prashnopanishad, very highly evolved sage, highly regarded, highly evolved sage. And so all these are, this is an exalted teacher, because when you see that the exalted teacher is teaching well known in the Upanishads, in the Puranas, etc., there is a desire to study. Okay, this, a local teacher might mislead me, but this teacher who is what? Alaukika. Loka and local and alaukika. This alaukika means what? Out of this world, literally, Alaukika teacher. Teaching apaurusheya knowledge, a knowledge that is not human made, man made, woman made. It is, as I told you, seen by the seers of the mantra. And then, so therefore, it's a very holy knowledge, sacred knowledge, and is all to foster the trust in the ahankara, so that the ahankara will say, ha, Brahmaji is teaching, okay, I'll come and sit. But a local teacher called Brahma, I'm not interested in. I want that real Brahmaji to come and teach. But again, if the student is some roadside fellow, just sitting in front of the teacher, again nobody is interested. It doesn't make news. It is not study worthy. Because somebody got it, some fellow got it. Some roadside riffraff got it. Who cares? That's why we have exalted students, exalted teachers, exalted students. The student in the 7th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad is none other than Narada. Narada, who knows everything. Narada, who knows grammar. Narada, who knows shiksha, pronunciation, kalpa, how to do rituals, vyakarana, grammar. And then what else? Nirukta. Nirukta is, all these synonyms and all these things. He knows all the grammar, he knows the synonyms, he knows the know-how of doing rituals, he knows the Vedas, he knows astrology, he knows astronomy, and he knows, Dhanur Vidya, Shastra Vidya, Nakshatra Vidya, Ayurveda, he knows all the Upavedas. He knows the 6 angas, the 6 branches of the Vedas which we just talked about, and he knows the Upavedas, art of warfare, art of, fortune telling with the help of the stars, astronomy slash astrology in those days. He knows, Ayurveda, he knows archery, he knows everything. But he says, Soham Bhagavah, Shochami, Shokasya Param, Tarayatu Bhavan. Please, O revered teacher, O Lord, he tells Sanat Kumara, I know all this, but I still grieve, I am subject to grief, even though I know so much. Sanat Kumara laughs. Oh, why are you laughing? I am laughing because what you know is nothing. You just happen to know a lot of nothing. How much is a lot of nothing? Nothing. A little bit of nothing, still nothing. This is the beauty of this. So you have exalted teachers featuring in the Upanishad, starring in the Upanishad. You have exalted teachers. and then you have exalted students. And this is the beauty of the Upanishad, because there is a shrotra buddhi prarochanartham. This is all made to whet the appetite of the future shrotas. Shrotas means the listeners, like, like all of you listening now. Then you say, oh, then if the teacher called Brahmaji is so exalted, who is this Ashvalayana? I have not heard of him. Let me tell you, Ashvalayana is not an ordinary person. Rigvedacharya, he had a Vedic school, Pathashala, he was teaching, it is elsewhere mentioned. And besides, he is also the author of very important Grihya Sutras. In addition to following a particular Veda, I told you the Veda was given to families to, foster and keep. One also naturally belongs or follows a particular sutra, and these are four in number, based on the sages who wrote them. So sutras are basically, sutra means little aphorisms, but here sutra means a particular interpretation of how a ritual should be done. You see, you go to Indian households, and then in some households, let's say just now this Mahalakshmi festival just went by on Friday. We had this Vara Mahalakshmi, which is an annual festival. But then people in certain parts of India perform certain rituals on that day, and in other parts of India they perform some other rituals. And so then if you see, why you do this in your house differently? Oh, we are Apastambha Sutra followers. Apastambha is a very common sutra followership. It has a great followership in what is that, in South India. And that is that was these Grihya Sutras are there. So many people, so many sages are there. Baudhayana, Gobhila, Apastambha, and then Ashvalayana. All these are people who wrote the subtle differences and of interpretations of how should the Vedic religion, the Vedic tradition, be expressed in day-to-day life. That's why the same thing, Navaratri, is followed so many different ways. Some people say, oh, we should fast without even taking water, nirjala. And some people say, no, we can have water, we can even have one-time meal, because this is what we do in our family. This is what the whole thing. Ashvalayana is the author of Ashvalayana Sutras. In olden days, they didn't have Twitter, so therefore you followed a sage, which was very nice. This was a very, very, beautiful thing to do. Now we just follow, people on Twitter, some celebrity and all. What a waste! What a huge waste of time, So this is Ashvalayana, who is what a household name everybody knows. Or we can take it as some other Ashvalayana, it doesn't matter, but it's a familiar name, and so therefore it is interesting that this is the name that is chosen, and he is the student of this Upanishad. And the student of this Upanishad, Ashvalayana, approaches the teacher. Why does he approaches the teacher? Why does, first of all, because even though he is so exalted, even though he is the author of the Ashvalayana Sutras, like Narada, he might still be subject to grief, subject to self-dissatisfaction. And you see, if grief, fear, dissatisfaction are real, if they are sat, they cannot be removed. They cannot be removed. That which is real cannot be removed. Oh, then it should be, maybe it is unreal. If it is unreal, then you need not remove it. Then what is the problem here? It's in between real and unreal. So asad asadbhyam anirvachya. It is experienced, so I cannot dismiss it. But then it is not there all the time, so I cannot affirm it. This is the problem with samsara. It can neither be affirmed nor be dismissed. This is the problem with everything that you see in the whole Jagat. Everything that you interact with, everything that you objectify is neither here nor there. This is why the sorrow has to be addressed. So you're not trying to remove the sorrow. What are you trying to remove? Atma Ajnanam. And like I said, you may know all the branches of knowledge. If you don't know this, it is the greatest, the loss of the absolute is an absolute loss. The loss of the infinite is an infinite loss, which leads you, if you lose the infinite, if you miss the absolute, then what happens is that you are always absolute, you're seeking infinitely. You become an infinite seeker instead of the seeker of the infinite. We saw that in the earlier class. Very important distinction, slight subtle distinction, but very important to keep this in mind. So, better to be a seeker of the infinite, then the quest is finite. But if you're an infinite seeker, then Om Namah Shivaya, you have to say that's the only option left. Because you keep on seeking the finite infinitely, that is what it means. And without the teacher has a very important place in this study, and this is what we'll be seeing in the subsequent sessions, how that is there. So, but for now we will see that Ashvalayana does something that that all the people on who have these big millions of followers on Twitter do. If they do something, what everybody, it becomes a big trend. It starts to trend. That's why if Ashvalayana approaches the Guru, then what? Then we feel comfortable to approach the Guru, because Ashvalayana is a role model, he is a sage. And so this Ashvalayana, what does he do? Bhagavantam, the Lord, Parameshtinam, Parameshtinam it means what? Parameshti means the God of the God of the God of the God of the God, the great grand sire of all the Devatas, Brahmaji. Brahmaji is the creator of everything, so he is the master of everything. So Ishvara in the form of Brahmaji, who has given rise to everything. All devatas are non-separate from him anyway, but then he reigns over them. So this Lord Brahma, what did he do? Bhagavantam, atha, and then Ashvalaganaha, what did he do? Bhagavantam here means the one, Pujaniyam, Pujavantam, the one who is worthy of worship, worshipful. And then what, and then the one who he approached, this Parameshti, Lord Brahma. Parameshti means what? Sarva Utkrishta Sthana Nivasam, the one who occupies the absolute. There's no one above him. This Ishvara, there is no one above him. Such a person he approached, and then what? Parisametya. Parisametya means, having upasametya, having approached. Upa, near, sametya, going near. And you don't go near the Guru to just hang out and say, let's have coffee. No. The going to the teacher is for one purpose and one purpose alone, for the sake of gaining this knowledge. No other purpose. Okay? So, and then vidhivat upasannaf papristha. Vidhivat means, Vidhivat means following all the rituals that are there, Samitpani, etc. Taking some, you don't approach three kinds of people empty-handed. And this is all in the culture, Riktapanirna pashyet Rajanam Daivatam Gurum. Don't see three people empty-handed. The king, even if you don't like the king, somebody who's a ruler. When you go to see the ruler, you take a little gift. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, something. It's the heart that counts. It's the thought that counts. Rajanam Daivatam, when you go to a place of worship, you may take a fruit, you may take a flower, you go to the temple, don't go empty-handed. You take incense, you give something. Take some oil for the lamp, anything. And then the third category is Guru, because all these, These are all, service oriented, entities. Raja supposed to be a service oriented entity. Bhagavan is there just to serve you, and then that's why he's sitting in the temple. And then Guru also is there only for service and seva, and the whole life is given for service. And so you take something, you know you take something. And that is why Ashvalayana also, so the word upasametya includes all this. The upasarga, upa here means near, sametya means, vidhivat upasametya, according to the tradition of the time. And so what did he take? What do you take for the Guru? If the Guru is a grihastha, then you take some, sticks of wood, that you pick up twigs, you pick up from the floor of the forest. You take that for, because the grihastha Guru has to do every day Agni Hotra, you give it for their rituals. You give it, and then what do then uvacha uktavan, asked. And then there is one small word here. Before we find out what he asked, let us go back to the first word here, atha. Atha, very interesting. Atha means, thereafter. Nobody starts nobody starts a text with thereafter. Thereafter means what? After what? What has come before we don't even know, but suddenly you are saying thereafter. Very interesting. This small word atha includes a huge list of things. And then atha also is mangala suchaka. It is instead of om or along with om. Omkarascha atha shabdascha, Omkarascha atha shabdascha, Dvavetau brahmanah pura, Kantham bhitva viniryatau, Tasman mangalikau ubhau. Very interesting. Apparently, when Lord Brahma, who is the teacher in this Upanishad, created, so to speak, projected this whole universe, Ishvara in the form of Lord Brahma projected this whole universe, he kind of patted himself on the back and said, not bad, not bad, old man, you've done a great job here, look at this. And so he said two words of joy. What were they? Om Atha. Om Atha. So then, Om, and they spontaneously came out of his throat, his mouth. They broke through his throat and came out as spontaneous utterances, Om and Atha. So Omkara, and the Ucharana of Omkara is a sound symbol which means Bhagavan. Because it has come from Bhagavan, it is Bhagavan, non-separate from Bhagavan. And Atha Shabda, Atha means what? This what Brahmaji said, Atha. And then Omkarascha Atha Shabdascha, Dvau Etau, these two, Brahmanav Pura. Pura means before, after he made the creations long back. Brahmanaha from Brahmaji, Kantham Bhitva Viniryatav, it spontaneously broke through his vocal cords, and they became the first words of which the universe heard. Nada Brahma we say. This is Nada. So the first sounds, the original sound of the universe, uttered by Lord Brahmaji, of course they are Mangala, Vachya and Shubha, auspicious sounds in the form of Om and Atha. And so as a nod to the teacher, as a salute to the teacher in this Upanishad, again we have this word Atha. Because who is the teacher here? Lord Brahmaji. Very nice, beautiful touch here, a very subtle touch by the Upanishad. And so he said Om and Atha, Tasmat Mangalikau Ubhau. These two are seen as extremely auspicious. So the first meaning of the word Atha here is that the Upanishad begins with a prayer for, Shubha. Shubha means the completion. And why should the Upanishad even pray for Shubha? Shubha means what? May all the people studying this Upanishad gain this knowledge. It is fantastic. It is wonderful. May all the people, studying this Upanishad gain this knowledge. Please let them gain this knowledge. Please let there be no pratibandhas. Pratibandhas means, any kind of obstacles in gaining this knowledge. Let them gain this knowledge freely and fully. This is what the whole thing is. So beautiful. And, so that is the first meaning of the word atha. The atha also has a grammatical meaning. Atha means, as I said, thereafter. Thereafter means what? Before, it simply means before Ashvalayana, who is the author of these Grihya Sutras and all these things, and before Ashvalayana approached the teacher, he was doing several other things. So he did all those things and then approached the teacher. you know we don't have a commentary for this Upanishad by Adi Shankara, but we have a nice commentary by Swami Shankarananda, who is the teacher of Swami Vidyaranya, who is the author of the Panchadashi. Swami Vidyaranya's teacher is called Shankarananda, and Shankarananda writes a beautiful commentary, bhashya, to this Upanishad. And very, very nice here. So he says, so the Atha is Swami Shankarananda, the commentator of this Upanishad, the Bhashyakara for this Upanishad, says Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti Anantaram. So there is a time gap between some things he did before and then approaching the teacher. What was he doing before he approached the teacher? Was he eating, drinking, busy being karta bhokta and crying about his fate? No. He was gaining the prerequisites for this knowledge. He was gaining the prerequisites for this knowledge because he had already some idea what this knowledge entailed, and he understood that there were many things that he had to gain and have to have a handle on before he could come to the teacher. He had to prepare himself. So the atha means those years, days, months, perhaps lifetimes spent in self preparation. You see? Yeah. So the tapas that is involved, that precedes the jnanam, here is called atha. Here, thereafter, after this austerities. That's why I said that before the Upanishads one studies Aranyakas, one studies and one performs various kinds of meditations, upasanas to calm down the ahankara, to gain emotional maturity, to calm down the raga dveshas. There are so many things. But you don't pursue them with a vengeance, otherwise it becomes an asurik tapas. That's not the point. Like even Ravana stood on one leg for 55 years, the Mahabharata says. And then what he did after that, we know. I mean, he terrorized his own country, and then he, abducted Sita, even though he had another wife who was actually a kind of a doppelganger of Sita, we hear. So her name was Mandodari, and she was a Sita lookalike. There was only one difference between them, the difference was that the pada, the sole of Mother Sita's foot had a kamala, a kind of a, what is that, lotus inscribed on it, and Mandodari had a crow. That was the only difference. There was a crow picture on her foot, on the bottom of her foot, and then this one had a Padma, a lotus, lily, whatever you want to call it. So even though he had a wife who looked just like Sita, he abducted Sita, all these horrible things he did. So this kind of a killer tapas is not needed. That's not the point of it. The tapas is not for the sake of, gaining mastery of the universe and then world domination. That's not the tapas. That is still being stuck in the first portion of the Veda. For the slow graduation and transition into Vedanta, the tapas looks very different. It is soft, and the tapas doesn't need not always take the form of sitting in the shape of a pretzel with the hands in chin mudra. That's not necessarily the look of the tapas. The tapas here is just leading your life and, as a dharmic person. Tapas here is the daily sacrifice that one has to do in order to keep the peace in the household, the daily kind of things one has to give up in order to raise a family. If you have a child, your life as you know it is gone. In America they say 18 years gone. In India, with our problem is we don't know when to stop parenting. We are parenting till they are 60, you know, and we are 90. This is what we do. And so this is what, this is tapas. The tapas is basically, learning when to let go, learning how to interpret dharma in the everyday. This is the tapas. Tapas is gaining what is called viveka. Through all these day-to-day austerities, cooking, cleaning, going for work, letting go of whatever one wanted the most, letting go, let somebody have it. Let somebody win the argument. Let somebody take it and go. It's okay. If it is meant to come, it will come, it will come in some form with me. It will come to me. So let it go. All this is tapas. Dealing with disappointment, that is tapas. It doesn't always have to look, you don't always have to study the Aranyaka. If you lead your life, it is itself a tapas. If you lead your life correctly, as the first portion of the Veda tells you to, that itself is the tapas. And then what, as a result, the fruit of this tapa means the heat. Heat here is the discomfort, the discomfort. Tapas is, when you sit down for meditation, when the sages sat down for meditation, they did not have air-conditioned caves, It used to just, wherever they sat, it used to be whatever weather, they had to, they had to get adjusted to it, and without, distraction, they would learn to sit. So anything that makes the mind calm down is tapas. And the tapas for Brahma Vidya is what is called sadhana chatushtaya. The fourfold tapas here, qualifications, sadhana chatushtaya. One, thankfully we have already learnt about mumukshutvam, learning to be a seeker of freedom, seeker of knowledge, by understanding that everything that I have been doing right now is just is wasted, because if I don't have this knowledge, I will never lose the sorrow, I will always be unhappy. This is the tapas. This is what is called, this is what is called mumukshutvam. We have already seen that in some detail, so I can go a little faster with the other things. Then we have, the ability to distinguish between the finite and the infinite, which brought Ashvalayana to the feet of the teacher, very important quality. Because if I don't have that ability to distinguish, I'm always transferring the, infinite onto the finite. Infinitely. I'm always transferring it. I'm always second guessing myself. I'm always, transferring it. So I'm trying to make the finite into infinite and hitting my head on the wall. It's a frustrating process. The finite will never become infinite, because the infinite is not a product. A finite is a product. Whatever is a product, what will happen? It will fall apart. Anything that comes together falls apart. And so therefore what? So therefore this ability to distinguish between the infinite and the finite, and to focus, to become abhimukha, to focus, to shift my goal towards the infinite, is called viveka. Nitya nitya vastu viveka. Between nitya and anitya. Anitya finite, nitya infinite. This you have to have. Otherwise you don't really go to the teacher. Why would you go to the teacher if you didn't have this? And then, the ability to let go of the finite. See, first I may have viveka, but then I may not have the strength to let go of the finite pursuits. I have to drop the finite, and that is called vairagya. Dropping the finite through having the objectivity. The subjectivity leads to clinging. Subjectivity means a wrong understanding of something which has an inflated value in my mind. For example, money. People have too much thing over money. They're just sort of, people just think, oh, money, so much money, this much money, that much money. But really speaking, nobody really wants money. Well, even if you ask the richest person on earth, do you want money? No, I want what it can give me. What can it give you? A sense of security. That's why it's called artha, security. This is what it is. So there is a value added attitude towards the money, and that is what I have to withdraw vairagya. Money or anything, family, it's inflated some kind of a feeling of codependency. That is what, I come out of that. This is vairagya. So we have seen three: viveka, vairagya, mumukshutvam. All that uparjanam, cultivation of all this, he was earning his viveka, ashvalayana, he was earning his vairagya, he was earning his mumukshutvam, he was, before he approached the teacher, he was preparing himself, he was earning all the credits, the prerequisites for this knowledge. Then finally, the fourth one, and that's why I saved it for the last. Because in Vedanta we just say only four things you have to know, and then the fourth thing becomes six things. So the four things together, the fourth thing which I'm going to talk about is called what? Shamadhi Shatka, a group of six. The fourth thing is actually a group of six. These are just common sense, mental, ways, kind of orientations of looking at the world in certain ways, having some, some kind of a understanding. This is what the whole thing is. And so what do we have here? This is shama, a resolved mind, a mind that's not always rebelling and taking up cudgels and fighting with itself, some inner split, fighting with others. There is some the mind which is not a Kurukshetra, always having a battle all the time. No conflict, a resolved mind, and a kind of a shanta mind, a peaceful mind. And that is again cultivated through daily living, through prayer, through the ability to let go. All this is connected. And then dhamma, the ability to not react physically to things that you don't like. Bahyendriya nigraha damaha, antarendriya nigraha shamaha. So this is, dhamma is what? Dhamma means kind of an, with all the regard to the organs of action, I have a say over the organs of action. You feel like hitting somebody, it doesn't mean that that gives you the ability to just go and, give somebody a slap. You can have the feeling, you breathe it out, you convert it into shama, and then you go on. You may be angry with the person, but you don't always act out. Not acting out is dhamma. Then uparati. Uparati is letting go of the small stuff, then letting go of the big stuff. Sometimes the small stuff becomes the big stuff. One is always worried about something or the other. Letting go is uparati. And then we have titiksha. Titiksha is sahanam sarva dukkhanam apratikara purvakam chinta vilaparahitam sa titiksha nigadyate. Titiksha means the ability to put up with discomfort, physical and mental, without either wailing and complaining about it or without inwardly imploding and dying out of worry. This is titiksha. And then we have shraddha. Shraddha I will save because that is one of the teachings of Lord Brahmaji, and he talks about shraddha. But briefly, shraddha, we'll take a big look at shraddha in the next class tomorrow. But but briefly, shraddha is trust pending understanding, devotional trust pending understanding. I have some trust. So this is what is shraddha. And then finally samadhanam, focus. These six things are, since they are so connected, these are all attitudes that I cultivate in order to be a compassionate, non-reactive person. They are all clubbed together as the group of six pack. Yeah, six pack. So we have viveka, vairagya, mumukshutvam, and then we have this six pack. So this is what is called together called sadhana chatushtaya sampattihi, a treasure in, in the form of all this. And so this atha means Ashvalayana was going, Ashvalayana was busy collecting all these qualifications in order to gain this knowledge. So parisametya, shastriyena vidhina, Swami Shankarananda says, according to all the customary ways of approaching the teacher, doing namaskar, asking with a place of samvada, from a standpoint of samvada, respectfully asks him, uvacha. Uvacha is, past perfect, a long time ago, to indicate that this happened, this story took place a long time ago. Uvacha, asked him, Uktavan. What did he ask? And then what did Lord Brahmaji say? This will, comprise the next lecture, the subject matter of the next lecture. So I'll say the closing prayer, and like the previous class, we will have some time for, any questions that you may have. Okay? Yeah. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So like Nitin said, there are two places where you can type. One is the chat pod, that is for, greeting one another, and and if you want to say anything else. But if you want to ask questions, you can do it in this another Q and A, uh, you know this thing, Q and A pod. Okay, yeah. So
Swamini, we have one question already.
Yeah.
If you want to take it up.
Sure.
Yeah.
There was one from the morning we haven't addressed. Also, I will take that up also. So, doesn't atha also mean now? Yeah, now means after all these things have been done. Yeah, that is the whole idea. In regular parlance, sometimes it is used, but it means, technically it means thereafter. And then karma is finite. So how by doing karma can you gain infinite? That's my question to you, Sudhakar. Yeah, that is what I've been asking in the last two talks. How? Meaning, from a rhetorical sense, you cannot gain the infinite by karma. Therefore, it is by Shravanam alone, Vedanta Shravanam, through listening to the teacher. Listening is not an action, even though you may bring yourself to a place of listening, but you cannot, you don't really will to listen. Listening happens, it knocks off the notion one is incomplete, one is a desiring person. So you cannot gain the infinite through karma. You are absolutely correct. That is what we have been talking about. Okay? Yeah. Then can you explain again the the chatushtaya, sadhana chatushtaya. Sadhana means these are the qualifications, means. So first one, viveka, the ability to distinguish between the finite and the infinite, and the courage to choose the infinite and drop the finite. Vairagya. Then we saw this six pack: Shamadama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, Samadhanam, all these attitudes to being a student, an ideal student. And then finally Mumukshutvam, the understanding, what Sudhakar said in the earlier question: karma is finite, and by doing karma I am not going to gain moksha. Moksha is an as though gain, and I am just going to drop the ignorance through through knowledge, because if ignorance is the problem, the antidote is only knowledge. So that is what the whole thing. Then one more question: please give the list of Shat Sampatti. Shama, resolved mind. Dama, a resolved organs of action, where you have a say over organs of action. Uparati. Uparati means the ability to let go and not obsess about things in life. And then Shraddha, devotional trust, reverential, the cultivation of reverential trust, and then Shraddha, Titiksha. Titiksha means the ability to put up with all kinds of discomfort. And then Samadhanam. Samadhanam, single minded focus. I don't look here or there. I am completely absorbed in this, in this pursuit. I don't get distracted. Okay, yeah. Then it seems to me that most of us do not question about the content of the teacher or the teacher of the Upanishads. It is more about the inability to relinquish or detach from the samsari routine or demands. I guess one has to graduate to that level of some point. Clarifications, comments. Yes, you are absolutely right. Well, you know, you may naturally have Shraddha, but many people do question. Many people do question the knowledge. Many people do question the need for the teacher. All these things. So we cannot say most. Many people may not question. Many people question. All kinds of people make up this world, and then the inability to relinquish, to let go of this routine. Yes, that is very that is an important that's an important thing to see, that somehow, even though in the classroom I find that people are very very clear how this how why this knowledge is important, how this functions, etc. But then what happens is that they go home. After they go home or after they log off, then suddenly those doubts come back, and there is not enough space. One is back in the vat of samsara. That's why we need to do Shravanam not once a year but regularly. Regular Shravanam is the way to go. This is what gives the ability. This is what gives the little space, and this is what gives the ability to gain that inner space between you and the problems, or whatever you called it, the samsari routine, etc. Okay. Yeah.
I think that's all,
Yeah,
Swami
one
your
one from the
questions.
morning, was there, which we did not address, and that was an interesting
Mhm.
and an important question. If I may just take that up. So in the morning, somebody
Yes.
asked, yeah, in the morning somebody asked, is it, if I have the desire for this knowledge, is it okay to attend every webinar and every seminar on the Upanishads and on related topics? This is a very wonderful question, an important question. Why not? You have to start somewhere, and then you will see, as you start doing that, as you start attending. In the beginning, one is like a cow anyway. Let put in the pasture, and then the cow indiscriminately eats everything that is green. And then so like this, the new student of Vedanta is likened to the cow who eats everything in the pasture. So this is something which is we have to understand this. And in the beginning, yes, open yourself up to whatever is coming. And then what happens in the when you start to listen, you will find, just like you have Ishta Devata, you may resonate a little more with a certain kind of teaching, whether it's a certain parampara or a certain person perhaps, and that's allowed in the tradition. That's okay. That's totally allowed, and that's totally encouraged also. That's why the teachers come in all form, with beards, without beards, in female body, in male body. Sometimes, people have father issues. It is easier to learn from a teacher who is in a female body. Sometimes they have mother issues, it's easier to approach a person in a male body. And sometimes they have what, sometimes people have father issues, mother issues, both at the same time. Where do you go then? And then you go Hayagrivam Upasmahe. Hayagriva was also a teacher of Brahma Vidya. Face of a horse. You have all these things in the Puranas. Even in the Madhu Vidya, Sage Dadichi, had a face of a horse, and then after that he taught. So all this is not a small thing. This is all very beautiful psychology in the Upanishads. And so you will find that you resonate to one particular parampara and that style of teaching, or and you may resonate with one particular person, and that's okay. And then you can stop listening to everything and everybody. Once the search becomes very fine tuned and the search becomes very urgent, then you can do that. It will happen on its own. Okay, but till then, no harm in listening and then deciding for yourself.
I think with this we come to a conclusion of another session of Weekend with Wisdom. Thank you again, Swamini ji, for
Thank you.
a very insightful session on Vedanta. And viewers, do not forget to attend tomorrow morning session at 6:30 a.m. Thank you, everyone. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you, Advaita Academy people. Thank you all for coming. Om Namah Shivaya.